In Lesson 5, we're going to be talking about using formulas in geometry. And all of these are formulas that you should be familiar with. We're just going to be doing kind of a quick review on this. And two of the terms that we're going to want you to know are perimeter and area. Hopefully those are familiar to you. Perimeter being the distance around a figure, around the outside edge, whereas the area is the space inside of a figure. And one thing that I want you to keep in mind is that the perimeter is always measured in linear units. Where when we talk area, we are measuring in square units. What's the difference there? Well, if we are talking about 1 linear inch, 1 linear inch, just roughly, would be as so. Whereas 1 square inch means 1 inch by 1 inch. Here, this would be 1 square inch. And you can see those are two very different things. Linear measures compared to square, or linear units to square units. Okay, so when we're talking about a rectangle, you can see that if we are talking about the perimeter, they have the little cursive L for length, W for width. In our book, the formula for perimeter looks as so. 2W plus 2L. Because we know if we were to add them up, length plus width plus length plus width, this is how it would simplify. Area, hopefully you are familiar with, as being length times width. Many of you also might know that as base times height. That means the same thing. My figure 2, I can tell, is a square because all of the sides with these tick marks, all of the sides are congruent. If I were to add them up for the perimeter, S plus S plus S plus S, would you agree? Well, that perimeter would simply be written as 4S. The area, well, if it was length times width, would you agree S times S would really give me S squared? And so sometimes for a square you see it written as so. And then finally for our triangle, perimeter, we're adding up the outside. And so here, A plus B plus C would be giving me my perimeter measure, where the area, many of you have probably learned as 1/2 times base times height. That can also be written as base times height divided by 2, so you might also see it as this, base times height all over 2. That means the same thing. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind is that when you're talking about a triangle, the base can really be any side of the triangle. It doesn't always have to be the side that is on the bottom. And so, therefore, when you're talking about the height, well, by definition, the height is a segment from a vertex that forms a right angle with a line containing the base. Now, another word that we may use for height is the word altitude. And if you look below the 3 examples of our triangles, they're showing you that sometimes the altitude is actually a side of the triangle. Here in my right triangle, it's actually on one of the side lengths. Here, my altitude is inside my triangle. And in the last one, my altitude actually falls outside of the triangle. And so depending on what type of triangle you have or which side you choose to be the base, will determine where your altitude will fall. If I look in example A, they're asking me simply to find the perimeter and the area. So I want you to note that we're going to have 2 answers for each question. My perimeter, we said, well, 2w plus 2l, or if we simply add these up, 6 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4, we know that we're going to find a perimeter of 20 inches. My area, well, length times width, 6 times 4, we're going to have an area of 24. This is going to be inches squared, though, my square units. For my triangle, you can see, well, here they throw in a little bit of algebra, because one side given 6, another x plus 4, and another 5x. If I were finding my perimeter and I were adding those up, 6 plus x plus 4 plus 5x. I'm simply going to look to do some combining of my like terms. I can see here that if I have an x plus a 5x, and then I have a 6 plus a 4, well, once I simplify those, my perimeter is going to look as 6x plus 10. And there is no label here, and so we're just simply going to label it as units. 6x plus 10 units. You may or may not see sometimes that people put parentheses around it. That doesn't change it. My area, well, we have to decide what we're going to use as the base and the height. And above it said they have to form a right angle, and so we're going to choose to use 6 as our base and x plus 4 as our height. So if we take 1/2 times the base times the height, it would look as so. Now we're just going to look to do some simplifying. Now remember that multiplication is commutative, so you can do it in any order that you want. I actually look to simplify this part right here. I can take and multiply 1/2 times 6, and I know that I'm going to end up with a 3. Then I'm going to multiply that 3 by the x plus 4, which means we are going to end up doing some distributing there. Final answer for my area is going to be 3x plus 12. And this time this is going to be units squared. And again, I tend to put the parentheses around there, but it doesn't change my answer. Okay, let's flip it over and take a look at the back side. On the back side, we're going to do some reviewing on circles. And I'm hoping the words at the top of the page are familiar to you. The diameter is a segment that passes through the center of the circle and whose endpoints are on the circle. A lot of times what I would do is I would just ask you to draw me a sketch. And so hopefully for diameter you have this visual going on. Passes through the center and the endpoints are on the circle. Okay, it's all the way across. Our radius is a segment whose endpoints are the center of the circle and a point on the circle. So again, if we needed to sketch from the center to the edge, that would be my radius. And finally, knowing that the circumference of a circle is the distance around my circle, it's really the perimeter of my circle. Not sure they just choose to use a different word here. They're using circumference. So in the box in the middle, we're going to review, okay, what's the formulas for finding the circumference and the area of our circle? Now the circumference can be looked at or defined two different ways. Some people will learn it as pi times d. Pi times diameter, or because the diameter is really 2 radii, you can also say that the circumference is 2 pi r. And either way, we will end up with the same answer. Again, our circumference is going to be a linear measure, so when we label it, it would be given in linear units. And the area of a circle, well, the area is given as pi r squared. This is how I remember the two formulas, is that because area is always labeled as squared, I know that this is the formula that has the r squared. Just to note that taking 2 pi r and pi r squared are two very different things. Now I'm hoping that you're familiar with the number pi. We use the Greek letter to represent it. It's irrational. We approximate it at about 3.14, but irrational means it goes on and on and on. It doesn't repeat. And as a fraction, it is given usually as 22/7. Now, when you do your calculations on your calculator, I'm going to ask you to use your pi button instead of using the number 3.14. Do you know why that is? The pi button gives more digits, and so the pi button is going to be slightly more accurate than just using the numbers 3.14. And so it's important on your calculator that you're able to find the pi button. A lot of times you have to hit the shift key or the second key to get to the pi button. If you're not sure, you can't find it on your calculator, you need to let me know and I'll help you out with that. Well, let's take a look at our last two examples, B and C. Example B, they're asking us to find the circumference and the area of a circle with a radius of 28 meters. And it says give the answer as a decimal and in terms of pi. So if we use our formulas, here my radius is 28. So if I choose to use my circumference formula with radius, 2 pi r, I'm going to make that substitution there. I just need to simplify. An answer given in terms of pi is considered exact. And what happens there is you just multiply or you simplify the number part of it, but you don't multiply it by pi. And so I'm going to take and I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 28. In terms of pi, I would give this answer as 56 pi meters. That would be considered an exact answer. Now, as a decimal, that's when we would just go ahead and multiply it out. And when you multiply that out on your calculator, that's going to give us an approximation, which is why I use this little squiggle symbol here. That means approximately or about. And so the circumference is about, let's see here, I have about 175.9 meters. And it doesn't tell me how to round, so if it doesn't tell you, at least give me to the 10th. That would be sufficient. That's going to be my final answer. Now when I go to calculate my area, we know that area is pi r squared. And so we need to remember that we're taking that 28 and we're squaring it, 28 times 28. In terms of pi then, my answer would give me 784 pi, and that would be meters squared. This would be an exact answer, and the approximation is what we would get when we multiply by pi. So 784 pi on my calculator, and we would find that that's about 2,463.01. Now, if I were rounding to the tenths and I wanted to show that, then I would just put 0.0. That would let me know that that's how that rounds. And again, that is my approximated value. Example C wants us to find the diameter of a circle that has a circumference of 50 pi. Give the answer as a decimal and in terms of pi. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the diameter, and they have given us the circumference. What we're going to do is we're actually going to start with the formula. Okay? They give us circumference, and so if I am working, well, we want diameter. Do you agree that I could just say circumference is pi times d, Let's plug in what we know. We know the diameter is 50 pi. Or sorry, excuse me. We know the circumference is 50 pi. So that's actually going to be what we plug in. This tells me that 50 pi is equal to pi times d. Now some of you might be able to pretty easily tell me what is pi diameter. But if we had to solve and we wanted to know what the diameter is, we would look to get d by itself. So I would go ahead and I would divide both sides by pi. Now because this answer is given in terms of pi, it's very nice. Let's just divide out. So we are finding that 50 equals d. What does that mean? Well, it means that my diameter is 50 units. Now, what about in terms of pi? Well, we don't actually have to give it an answer in terms of pi. This just came out as to exactly 50. That would be my final answer. Okay, if you have more questions on this, please let me know. You can also check out the online videos that are through our textbook and follow up with me there. Other than that, you can go ahead and get started on the assignment.